WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM's Master of Business Administration is designed to accommodate the career needs of professionals across a variety of work organizations. More information at business.udmercy.edu.
It's the Metro on 1019 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. Today on the program, the Gilbert Family Foundation recently gifted $1.8 million to a local nonprofit to expand green spaces in Detroit. We'll learn more about that.
But first, on the Metro, if you walk into any public building, you should notice some things. Sizable bathrooms, wide entrance doors, and ramps when needed to access the buildings in the first place. And that's because past generations of lawmakers here in Michigan and around the country wanted to ensure that disabled individuals could properly navigate buildings like non-disabled people. But those laws aren't always followed. And right here in Detroit and in Michigan, several women with disabilities filed a lawsuit to make some Wayne County, Detroit, and state buildings more accessible. Recently, a U.S. district judge allowed a case to continue as it denied the state's request for government immunity. To understand more behind this lawsuit, why it was filed, and what we can expect moving forward, we're joined by the attorney for the plaintiffs in this case, Michael Bartnick. He is an attorney with Law for Baby Boomers. And Michael, I want to welcome you to the Metro.
Good morning. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So I mentioned a little bit about the lawsuit, but can you tell us how did you get started, and specifically, who are the plaintiffs involved in this case, and why was this lawsuit filed?
Sure. So the plaintiffs are three women who have disabilities and live and work in metropolitan Detroit. Jill Babcock is an attorney and a person with mobility and other disabilities. Marguerite Maddox is a disability advocate who lives in Detroit and has mobility issues as well as some hearing impairment. And then Ashley Jacobson is an attorney who lives and works in the courts as a private practicing attorney in Washtenaw and Livingston County. So we had to file the lawsuit because they have repeatedly had difficulties getting into and around the courts in metropolitan Detroit, as well as the public offices and the meeting rooms or the public auditoriums in these buildings, and also specifically the toilets and the toilet rooms. They've also experienced difficulties at the polling locations and some of the transit centers. Mm-hmm. You mentioned at the outset, how many of these buildings do have accessible entrances and toilets, but frankly, most of those are private companies. They don't want to get sued, so they have found it they want their customers to be taken care of. They want their customers to come into Meijer or other locations. And so they make the necessary changes. Unfortunately, we found at the Coleman A. Young Building, the Frank Murphy Hall of Justice, the 36th District Courthouse, the Rosa Parks Transit Center, and the polling locations that my client Marguerite actually uses. They are just not up to code, even though these laws have been in place since 1970s and 1990s.
All right. Well, you mentioned that these places aren't up to code, and especially for an attorney, I mean, basically with all the courts you mentioned, you can't really work in Detroit without having access or being able to access these venues. So the question then I'd have for you is, let's get into some of the specifics with these buildings. What laws are you saying are violated, and how are some of these accessibility issues violating those laws?
So the ADA and the Persons with Disabilities Civil Rights Act both require entrances. They both require accessible toilets. So let's start with the toilets. When you go into a public restroom, there should be at least one toilet stall that is large enough for a person in a wheelchair to get into and around and on and off the toilet. So that's why you have you see the grab bars, and you see a larger room stall, and the door has to open up and close properly. The sinks have to be the proper height. A person in a wheelchair has to be able to reach the water, the soap dispenser, and the towels. Going in and around the building, the doors either need to be automatic or they have to be light enough and positioned properly so that a person in a wheelchair can open and close that and get through the entrance. What we found in the city-county building, or the Coleman A. Young Municipal Center, all of the doors inside, once you get inside the building, are heavy and glass doors, and they're difficult to open. In the Coleman A. Young Municipal Center is a 13-story city tower and has a 20-story courthouse tower. They're in that huge building, which is accessed by all three of my clients, as well as obviously thousands of people in the city. There is only one accessible women's public restroom in the basement and two accessible public men's rooms in the basement. All of the other restrooms on the city tower side are locked to the public including all of the public floors where public business is conducted. On the courthouse side, many of the toilet rooms are open to the public, but none of those are accessible to a person with disabilities. So in both instances, if you're using a wheelchair or if you have not every disability is visible, but if you have bladder issues or other issues where you need to use a toilet, you have to get on an elevator and go all the way down to the basement and then roll yourself or walk yourself to the other end.
Yeah, it is peculiar how you bring that up. We're talking about Coleman A. Young, which has a city side, a lot of city business and things happen. People go there for municipal work dealing with the city. And then you have the courthouse side, which you also mentioned, where we have a lot of Wayne County civil litigation happening in that courthouse. And then accessing, right? You have these private bathrooms you mentioned versus the public. You got to go all the way down to the basement in order to use that. Still, from what we've heard, at least in terms of the response to what's happening here, Sharon Banks of the Detroit and Wayne Joint Building Authority, which oversees the Coleman A. Young Municipal Center, she told the Free Press that the building authority recently engaged with engineers to ensure the building was up to code. So is this a situation where what falls off of that, this might render the case moot? Have you been seeing any movement that they've been making there? Or what's your response to Ms. Banks' response to this lawsuit and claim?
The building authority takes the position that they are only responsible for certain parts of the building, even though they own and operate the entire building. They have offloaded or delegated responsibility back to the city and to the county and to the state with regards to anything other than the entrances to the building and to those two restrooms in the basement. They do not take any responsibility for any of the other restrooms in the building. They do not take responsibility for any of the jury boxes or making sure that any of the doorways are properly
and that's fair.
Updated.
If I can just jump in here, just because I know I'm running low on time. Basically, what you're saying is even if she makes the fixes, that's not going to take care of the big complaint with the entire building, which I understand. So then I guess my question for you would be, is this a motion for summary judgment? I mean, should I expect that to get filed pretty soon and open and shut? And what should our reaction be if that's not granted?
We would like to think that a motion, that it would be an open and shut case, but we recognize that there are going to be factual disputes. But it's more likely that there would be a motion for a partial injunctive relief as to some of the items which are undisputed or which can be readily proven, and which are important and urgent, such as the polling locations. This is an election year.
Yeah.
And the city has a number of polling locations. The Carr Center for Justice did an audit just 2 years ago and found that almost all of the locations inside the city of Detroit are not accessible for somebody who wants to vote in person. Yeah. So that includes the locations. It includes the ballot boxes. It includes having a ballot machine and that's the proper height and can be used by someone with accessibility issues.
Well, this is very important stuff. We're going to have to continue to monitor this to make sure that any laws that are in place are being enacted. But Michael Bartnick, attorney with Law for Baby Boomers, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro and sharing your insight.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
This is the Metro right here on 101.9 WDET FM. That was Nick Austin. I'm Tia Graham. And coming up is one of Detroit's most important art organizations at risk of closing its doors. Well, we will find out next right now with the president of the Carr Center on the Metro. You all stay right there.
This is the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. Now, we just heard a little bit about the Carr Center. And the Carr Center is Detroit's premier arts organization focused mainly on promoting and sharing Black arts. Like so many other organizations, art organizations, the pandemic made the financial picture for the Carr Center a little challenging. This past week, a headline of an article featured in the Detroit Free Press even suggested the Carr Center may be in a little bit more danger than many people may know. If this is true, it is a big deal. To get a better idea of what the organization is currently going through, their financial health, we have the Carr Center's CEO, Oliver Ragsdale Jr. here. Oliver, welcome back to the Metro.
Always glad to be here. Good to see you, too.
Awesome. So, what's going on with the Carr Center? Is everything okay?
Well, we're struggling.
Yeah.
We're struggling like everybody else. We're having a hard time finding new donors, new funders, increasing the donations of previous donors and bringing previous donors back who have dropped off of our donation wheel, if you will, and so it's been difficult. We have accumulated some debt as we worked at building out the new facility in the Park Shelton, the Carr Center Performance Studio, and so it's been a struggle. It is a struggle, but we've had these struggles over the 33 years that we've been in business, and when you get beyond the headline of the article and you read about the impact that the organization is having on the community, the impact the organization has on young people, when someone like Debbie Allen says that the Carr Center is the Kennedy Center of Detroit, that's a pretty masterful, pretty important statement to make.
It is, Oliver. I just like you were talking about the young generations and learning from the Carr Center, I personally learned about Rodney Whitaker, and it just kind of spread on through there. Marcus Belgrade. I mean, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So much knowledge is coming out of the Carr Center. So, when we talk about funding and we talk about the dire straits that you all are in right now, do you see yourselves cutting any programs or anything like that? Or are we still going to see the same amounts of arts and culture coming out the Carr Center?
Well, I think that the amount of programming will be determined on the amount of financial support that exists. We have cut back a little bit over the last few months, but I think that the most important thing is to maintain the high level of quality that the community has come to expect that the Carr Center will bring. We were in an interview yesterday, and Sabrina Nelson, that wild, incredible artist, was talking about the Carr Center had the grand dames of Micheline Thomas, Carrie Mae Weems, and Terry Lynn Carrington all at the same time in the same room talking about the work that they do and the work that we have done together. So when you have that kind of impact, and it's a pretty significant piece. So every day we are looking, every day we are hoping. We have incredible faith. Recently, I was involved in a panel discussion where someone talked about the crescendo and decrescendo of the Carr Center, and that's sort of what we experience. We need to crescendo, and we need to be able to put an infrastructure in place that is sustainable over the long term.
And Oliver, when I think about, of course, once again, just being in the Carr Center, being immersed in what's happening there, and being with the audiences, and just once again, being immersed in music and arts and culture, the Carr Center seems to have leaned into different ways in order to bring in individuals, whether you all are partnering with other entities or organizations, whether you're bringing in digital aspects. No matter what it is you're trying to expand. Now, talk a little bit about your expansion and how it's helping bring in audiences and visitors.
Well, I think that's sort of a part of how we got into the problem. During COVID, we went into the digital world, and we were extremely successful in the digital world. We produced over 30 programs during that period of time, and not only did they impact the Detroit community, but nationally and globally. We always like to talk about the guy from Perth, Australia, who would send us a note in the chat room. I'm getting ready to have my morning coffee as your program begins. That's pretty significant. When we opened the new space in the Park Shelton, we continued to try to do the digital and the live programming and weren't able to sustain both of them.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to try to be able to do, because that gives us the opportunity to not just impact the Detroit community, but it gives us the ability to take Detroit and Detroit art to the world. And the Detroit art, as we all know, there's something very special in the water here. And when you're able to let the world know about it, to see it, to experience it, to understand it, that's really significant. And I think one other thing that I think is really important is we do black art, but we don't do black art just for black people. We do black art so that the world knows and understands black people, knows and understands and sees the creativity and the things that are going on.
You know, Oliver, that's a very interesting take, and I'd like to unpack that a little bit more, because it seems like it's something you've thought about. How do you unpack black art or expose black art to a broad range of folks that's inviting for like everyone to kind of understand?
Well, what we like to talk about is content in context. And the point there is that the experience is very different in a Carr Center type presentation than in a traditional orchestra hall type of a presentation, or at a traditional large art institution. And the best example that I can give is applause. In a traditional black environment, it is not unusual for people to applaud when they hear something great. It can be in the middle of the piece. It can be in the middle of a 4-movement symphony, or whatever the case may be. In a traditional concert hall, that kind of behavior, that kind of participation, that kind of excitement is not seen throughout the whole performance. So that's black content in a black context. Mm-hmm. And we want the whole world to have that experience. It's clear that it's happening. Whether you look at a jazz musician like Herbie Hancock, or you look at Beyonce.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because, I mean, if you go to the International Jazz Festival, you go down there to Hart Plaza, folks there, that's also part of that jazz culture, which, of course, has its roots in African-American tradition. But again, exposing that, people who are used to jazz are going to be used to hearing a great solo coming up and getting their applause in and things. So interesting point about that curation. And,
just sticking on topic there, what is coming to the Carr Center? What can we expect this spring, this summer, next few months?
Well, in the next few months, next few weeks and months, we're going to open an exhibition that we're calling Revisit, which will be works from our collection, if you will, from the Paradise Valley era when we were downtown, as well as the New Standards project that we did about 18 months ago. We have the Plowshares Theater Company that will be in residence in the space. The Gathering Orchestra will be back. We're doing a really exciting multi-gallery project that happens at the end of May and into June, called I'll Be Your Mirror, Reflections on Contemporary Queer. And we're also doing another exciting piece by bringing a young man from Detroit who grew up in Detroit, back to Detroit in residence. His name is Kyle Dixon, and Kyle was recently named the Associate Music Director and Conductor for the Memphis Symphony, and he's doing a project called Music Represents. He'll be in residence for a week, exposing Black composers and music of Black composers to both young people in a partnership with Renaissance High School, but we're also doing public performances.
All right, nice. The last thing I have for you is just, what would you tell people right now? They see the headline, they may not read the article. They see what's going on and hear what's going on. But what would you want people to know about the Carr Center right now?
If you read the headline, take the 3 minutes that it takes to read the article, because the article really speaks to what the organization does and the impact. And then go to our website and make a donation, thecarrcenter.org. That's the Carr Center with 2 R's, CARR, center.org, and make a contribution. We need the small contributions, but we need some large contributions to come into this. To build an infrastructure that's sustainable can't be done with $50 contributions. We need some major zeros.
Need the dollars. Oliver Ragsdale Jr., CEO, president of the Carr Center. Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro, giving us an update and letting us know you guys aren't going nowhere.
Hope not. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise.
Thank you.
This is the Metro on 1019 WDET. I'm Nick Austin alongside Tia Graham, and the solar eclipse that we've all been hearing about is passing through North America on Monday. The chance to see a total eclipse might only come once or twice in a lifetime, but to view the eclipse safely, you will need special solar glasses. Millions of people already have theirs ready to go, and chances are those glasses are made by a single business in Memphis, Tennessee.
On the factory floor at the American Paper Optics Company, Greg Dyer is busy packing boxes and stuffing envelopes.
This one's going to Springfield, Illinois. This is 250 glasses.
He fills orders from all across the country, both big and small.
They could be anywhere from 12 to 2,000.
And much larger. Orders for eye protection for this eclipse started coming in as early as 2 years ago, says company founder John Jarrett.
We've shipped already about 70 million glasses, and I suspect I'm going to approach right at 75 million by the time next week comes.
That's about 30 million more than the company made for North America's last total solar eclipse in 2017, when the path of totality covered less populated parts of the U.S. It's a lot of work for the small business, which is usually a top manufacturer of paper 3D glasses for other events and projects. In the lead up to this year's spectacle, they almost doubled their workforce to about 70 employees. Many of their glasses are branded for handouts with logos from big corporations, local libraries, even wedding parties, and NASA. Some well-known figures will wear them too.
Here's Al Roker on a pair of glasses. He'll be using those in the Today Show. Ohio State University bought 150,000 glasses. Coke in Atlanta is going to give away 100,000 glasses there.
And while that kind of personal flair can attract the eye, what's most important is that the eyewear has a solar filter certified to an international standard.
They're more than 1,000 times darker than sunglasses.
Susanna Kohler is with the American Astronomical Society. It's compiled a list of vetted sources to buy from, including American Paper Optics. Be wary, she says, of fake and counterfeit glasses that can claim to meet the ISO standard, but haven't been tested.
What you really want to be sure of is that your solar eclipse glasses came from a reputable manufacturer and a reputable vendor, that you didn't just go to Amazon and get whatever was cheapest and you don't know what you've received.
Of course, Jarrett will wear a pair of his own glasses when he travels to nearby Arkansas to bask in totality for a few minutes and watch others, possibly wearing his product.
The ultimate kumbaya moment. People are going to scream, dance, laugh. People are going to stand by themselves in silence. And it's going to be the most bipartisan moment of 2024.
After all, most Americans will be able to view at least a partial eclipse with the right glasses. For NPR News, I'm Katie Reardon in Memphis.
And Nick, I don't know if you've got your glasses already, but a quick safety reminder. The American Astronomical Society says to check your eclipse glasses before Monday's solar eclipse. They say you should wear the glasses inside your first house or the house first, where only bright light should be dimmed but viewable. If that works, take the glasses outside. You shouldn't be able to see anything other than the sun's reflection on certain surfaces, and if either test fails, don't use the glasses, and if your glasses pass that test, enjoy the eclipse.
This is the Metro on 1019 WDET. Thanks for that insight, Tia, to prevent me from using these plain old sunglasses to look at the sun. Not a good idea, but always a good idea to keep it locked here on the Metro, because coming up, we're going to take a look at an opera adaptation of the critically acclaimed 1996 Lars von Trier film, Breaking the Waves, and what to expect as it comes to Detroit for its opening night tomorrow. Stay tuned as the Metro continues.
Welcome back to the Metro, right here on 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham. Nick Austin is here. Taking a quick look at the weather forecast. Today, it's opening day. Weather will be mostly cloudy with a high around 46 degrees. This weekend, Saturday and Sunday, partly sunny both days, highs around 53 degrees. And Monday, eclipse day, looking partly sunny, then not at all, and then partly sunny again. It'll be a high of 63 in Detroit Monday.
That's right, Tia. But talking about things that are happening this weekend, we have this opera that's coming to town, and composer Missy Mazzoli has been called a post-millennial Mozart. And now Detroiters will get to see her work in action. Starting April 6th, tomorrow, at the Detroit Opera, and running through the 14th, Mazzoli's Breaking the Waves will take the stage. WDET's Ryan Patrick Hooper spoke with the composer about what Detroiters can expect.
Breaking the Waves is an adaptation of the 1996 film by the Danish director Lars von Trier. You know, when this film came out, Roger Ebert called it one of the best films of the 90s. And it was met with considerable acclaim, but also, you know, it was, I think, shocking to people because of its frank portrayals of a lot of things. There's violence in this opera, there's sex in this opera, there's the presence of the church and this kind of contentious relationship with members of the church. And so there's a lot to contend with, but I don't think that it's anything that opera goers haven't seen before, frankly. I think that opera is a place for big ideas, and it's a place for extreme ideas. And I don't find Breaking the Waves more shocking than Tosca, for example. I think it's in English, and it's a more contemporary story. And I do think that hits people harder. Breaking the Waves is an opera that asks big questions about the nature of love, the nature of faith, the nature of loyalty, and what does it mean to be a good person. And I think maybe the thing that's more uncomfortable than anything is that it's an opera that leaves you with more questions than answers. You know, I don't think that people come away thinking, I know what it means to be a good person after seeing this opera.
Now I'm pumped to go see this. That was a great explanation. You know, you talk about these concepts, and you as the composer, how do those big ideas that opera is so well equipped to take on, how do they actually funnel themselves into your process of writing and composing this music?
The amazing thing about opera is it has a lot of amazing superpowers, I think, that other art forms don't have. And I think that one of its superpowers is in its ability to say more than one thing at one time. So Breaking the Waves in a nutshell is about a woman named Bess McNeil, who's living on a very isolated isolated island in the Scottish Highlands in the 1970s in this isolated Calvinist community. She falls deeply in love with a man, Jan Nyman, who works on a nearby oil rig and gets permission from the church elders to marry him, even though they traditionally don't approve of matrimony with outsiders. And there's a whole song about that in the opera. And they have a couple months of wedded bliss when Jan is injured in an accident on the oil rig and is paralyzed from the neck down. Bess comes to believe that she has the power to heal him by being with other men and then telling him about it. So very, controversial sort of, this is a fictional story. This has not happened. But there's a lot of layers going on. And one of the concepts that Von Trier had when making this film was that it was a story in which everyone is acting in a way that they feel is the most good. So, the church is telling Bess something and they feel like they're doing the best for her. Her mother is steering her in a direction that she feels is best for her. Bess has conversations with God where God is telling her what to do. And they're all sort of acting I truly think from out of the goodness of their heart, yet still terrible things happen. And how do we get from point A to point B? So musically, how does this all manifest? I mean, and I think it manifests through the layering. So at any one time, Bess can be singing one thing and the words are communicating something, but the music is communicating something very different. And I think that the interesting part of this opera is where those two things meet. And where do everyone's good intentions sort of clash with each other? And I think that I've hopefully have illuminated that through the music and illuminated the psychological state of these people who are in a very extreme, very dark, traumatic situation, that I've illuminated that in a new and interesting way through sound.
I think that's the great power of music, is to take these huge concepts and be able to work through them in a way that, often we can't really say with words. And thinking about those concepts, connecting with the audience, what do you hope people take away from watching Breaking the Waves and hearing your compositions?
This may sound sort of lofty, but, I make music to feel less alone. And I make music to sort of explain the world to myself. Ever since I was a little kid, music has been the way that I've sort of sorted out big concepts in the world and the way through which I've understood the world. And in hearing music by other people, I feel that that's what they're doing. And it makes me feel connected to them. It makes me feel, less lonely. And so I really hope that people come out of this opera talking to each other, that it sparks conversations about the nature of faith and the nature of loyalty and what does goodness mean? And what does it mean to be a good person when the church is telling you one thing, but your husband's telling you one thing, but the church is telling you to obey your husband. And I think more often than not in life, the path is not so clear. Even if we all want to be good people, the path to goodness is tough and is not so, is not a clear path. So I hope that people are able to access a little bit of that through this story and come out talking about it. And again, my hope is not that they come out with a conclusion about the nature of loyalty or, the God's or the church's place in a community. It's just really to ask the questions.
That was composer Missy Mazzoli talking with WDET's Ryan Patrick Hooper about her adaptation of Breaking the Waves. It will be performing at the Detroit Opera April 6th through April 14th.
This is the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. That was Nick Austin. I'm Tia Graham. And while we are an industrial town here in the city of Detroit, greenery is a critical part of the city. Consider Belle Isle or Rouge Park, the Riverwalk, or Palmer Park. Detroit has a lot of land with it, and there are a lot of green spaces tucked within its industrial core. The Gilbert Family Foundation wants to expand those spaces as it recently gave a $1.8 million grant to the Greening of Detroit nonprofit. To talk about why greening the city is a priority for the foundation, we have JJ Velez here. He is Director of Public Space for the Gilbert Family Foundation. JJ, welcome to the Metro.
Hey, good morning, and thank you both for having me.
Awesome. So, the investment with the greening of Detroit is a part of the Gilbert Family Foundation and Rocket Community Fund's $500 million commitment, 10-year commitment to equitable opportunity across the city of Detroit, and this is just one of those pieces. So, talk about this particular grant.
Yeah, thank you. So the Gilbert Family Foundation partner up with Greening of Detroit, and as you mentioned, committed $1.8 million over 3 years. This grant really focuses on 4 key areas of investment. First one being workforce development through the partnership with Greening, working with them and their Detroit Conservation Corps to provide training for over 200 residents around tree artisan and landscaping technicians, providing jobs, opportunities, right? The second component is for tree keepers for kids. This area is around our education programming. It helps about 140 Detroit youth to participate and learn more about the environmental programs when it pertains to what's happening here in the city of Detroit. The third component is one that we call the Shade Salon, which really engages the community around art projects focusing on nature and trees and programs in the city of Detroit and in the districts. And then the last one is the community tree planting, which is really important with Greening, planting over 1,000 trees throughout the city of Detroit with the input of Detroit residents.
Which is really, really cool. I think about things that we talk about in terms of our environment and in making your space look better and feel better when you're walking through. Tree-lined neighborhoods and tree-lined streets are really important. So talk about how greening spaces can create it makes you feel better when you see those green spaces and you're around those green spaces. Yeah,
so I will say that, with the planting of trees and green spaces in general, it really just helps with individuals from a mental standpoint, right? It just plays a huge role in how you feel, what you feel. I think also with the planting of trees, it also has a health component, right? Making sure that those trees can, have some help with the carbon, right, and the footprint and environmental pieces. And then lastly is, global warming is real. We have had in the city of Detroit a lot of flooding. And so with adding more and more trees helps with that component of removing the potential of flooding in some of the areas within the city of Detroit.
And I think about some of the trees that are going out and some of the different things that are happening. Who's maintaining it? Is this built in within the...
And really understanding from them what the need, right, in order to continue the work. And so Greening, like I said, they've been doing this work for 35 years. And for us to collaborate and to be a part of what they've already been doing, it just made sense.
And just for 3 years with $1.8 million, investment in a grant, that's a lot of expansion that we're hoping to see throughout the city of Detroit from the greening of Detroit. So furthermore, how do you all plan to educate and develop the workforce throughout the city, just in terms of more grants or more outreach or more talking to people? I know you have this huge commitment with the Gilbert Family Foundation of 10 years, $500 million. So what are some other things that you all are seeing to help spread that wealth?
Yeah, so I will say, I lead the public spaces team for the foundation, and we are always looking for opportunities and collaboration with organizations, with programs and projects that they're already doing. And so, for us, looking at that work and just hearing what organizations are doing, it just, that's what we do, right?
Yeah, so my last question to you, and this is talk about the overall commitment to green spaces in Detroit, since this is what you do, and improving access to green spaces in general. We talked just a little bit about that in the beginning, and you hit on the importance for mental health and for quality of life. So just talk about that, expanding those green spaces.
Yeah, so, prior to my role with the Gilbert Family Foundation, I was with the city Parks and Rec Department. And so, with that back end of my work and the work that we do now, coming through a global pandemic and understanding, the importance of people getting out during that was really important for us to really double down and really understand that green spaces has a physical and mental place for everybody to get out, to be healthy, but to also just experience the environment and nature, right? It is really, really important. And as we look around Detroit is so beautiful. And people have done so much work to make this place so beautiful. Might as well just continue to support that and continue to do the work.
Yeah. I want to say thank you so much, JJ Velez, for being here, joining us on the Metro. JJ Velez is the Director of Public Space for the Gilbert Family Foundation. We'll see more green spaces throughout the city of Detroit through the Greening of Detroit's recent grant. Velez, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is the Metro on 101.9 WDET, where it's opening day, not only in the studios, but also at Comerica Park. And we will dive into the unexpected surprise start to the Tigers season and what to expect. A look at the season ahead when we return on the Metro.
Welcome back to the Metro, right here on 101.9 WDET FM. And coming up soon, we do have opening day. It is opening day, actually. The game starts soon.
It will. It starts at 1:10. And, this day is marked, I know, in orange and blue for every fan of baseball here in town. The home opener, some even who aren't fans. It's just like an unofficial holiday for us. But this year, it comes with a twist. The Motor City Kitties are off to a 5-1 start that's turning heads and challenging expectations. So to understand this surprising turnaround, we're joined by Cody Stavenhagen. He's Detroit's writer. He's the Detroit Tigers beat writer for The Athletic and co-host of the Turning the Corner podcast dedicated to Tigers baseball. Cody, welcome to the Metro.
Hey guys, how are you doing?
Hey, doing very well, especially with this start. I don't know how many fans expected the team to get off to such a great start, especially considering recent history. Let me know, one, are you surprised? And two, what would you say is the driving force behind the success?
Well, yeah, definitely a little bit of a surprising start, but to go 5-1 on the opening road trip, you really couldn't ask for much more. Even though that last game in New York got away from the Tigers a little bit, they were very close to an undefeated road trip. But this team so far has been really good pitching, and that was a theme that started in spring training. We saw pitchers up and down the roster throwing harder, using their arsenals better, either developing new pitches or seeming to just have a better feel for their stuff. That really continued in the first 6 games. Look, it's a long season. It's a small sample, but right now the Tigers are second in baseball in ERA. Their pitching has kept them in some close games, allowed them to go to extra innings, allowed the offense to come through and do just enough. The bullpen has been locked down in almost every situation. That's really been the strength of this team right now, and I would not be surprised if the pitching continues to be the strength of this team throughout the season.
That's right. Pitching. You refer to the bullpen and relievers coming in, helping out. But I think when we think of examples of the pitching that's been helping out, Matt Manning and Casey Mize might be pretty good examples. Casey being, of course, guy who got injured, was a big-time #1 pick for the Tigers, versus Matt Manning, someone who got sent down, didn't even start on the opening day roster. For folks who aren't so familiar, do you think these are two representative samples of why the team's doing well? What are their stories, or the stories that are most interesting to you about this team?
Well, yeah, I think Manning and Mize definitely two players who are very important to the Tigers, both in the present and the future. Two guys who were cornerstones during the really rough rebuilding years. Matt Manning was a number 9 overall pick. Casey Mize went number 1 overall in 2018. It's been a little bit of a non-linear path for both of them. They've battled through some injuries, a little bit of ups and downs. Casey Mize had Tommy John surgery yesterday in New York. Was the first time he started a major league game in more than 700 days. Yeah. We've seen flashes of good outings from both of them, but it just hasn't quite come to fruition. Both of them kind of examples of the fragility of pitching, both why pitching is valuable and why it can be dangerous to center a rebuild on pitchers. Just because they, sometimes availability is the best ability, and if that hasn't been the case for him. Good news is Mize is finally back healthy. He really looks like a different pitcher than he did pre-injury. His fastball, is harder. It has more vertical ride through the zone. It's more difficult for hitters to pick up and hit. His splitter looked really good yesterday. And Matt Manning has made some major tweaks to his arsenal over the past couple of years. Really a different pitcher than he was when the Tigers drafted him. So it's a little later than maybe Plan A, but if we're on the Plan B with Mize and Manning, it looks like maybe these guys are finally rounding into form and becoming something close, at least, to the pitchers they were hoped to be several years ago.
Cody, I only got 30 seconds left, but hey, have you changed your estimation for the season now based on this start? What are you looking for in the season moving forward?
Yeah, it's tough to predict. I think offense is still going to be a concern. You have a lot of young bats. I came into the year thinking maybe 83, 84 wins would be a good measure of success, and after a good start, I think that's certainly within the realm of possibility. So that's where I'm going to stick for now.
All right. Well, Cody Stavenhagen, Detroit Tigers beat writer for The Athletic, co-host of the Turning the Corner podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Definitely. And before we get out of here, it is not the opening day, but just the opening Friday of In the Groove, courtesy of Ryan Patrick Hooper. What do you got for us on a baseball day and holiday here in Detroit?
Thinking about the Tigers, wishing I was down there just trashing downtown with everybody that's coming in. Please pick up after yourselves. Today on In the Groove, we're going to highlight really talented young rapper coming out of the city, Jay Ton. I absolutely love his sound. Also, it's the 30th anniversary of Kurt Cobain's passing. Don't want to be a bummer, but we're going to take a look at some of his influences that got him here and, of course, the lasting influence of Nirvana.
All right.
That's the Metro for April 5th. The opening day, you can listen to recent episodes online at WDET.org and make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
The show is produced by Sam Corey, David Lyons, and Jack Philbrandt. Our engineer is Nate Bender, and music by Sam Bobian.
The Metro is a WDET production, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. If you like what you hear and want to support the Metro, consider becoming a member at WDET.org/donate.
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. Have a good time at the ball game.
Thanks for listening.
WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM is offering a new master's degree in ethical leadership focused on sustainable, ethical, and inclusive problem solving. More information at business.udmercy.edu.